Who doesn't love a good foggy sunrise? A few weeks ago, I posted a photo on Instagram of a sunrise coming through the trees with some fog that illuminated, obviously, the trees and the rays of light coming through, but a little bit of the ground as well. Actually turned out to be a pretty popular photo. It's also actually one of my favorites now. I'm going to go through how I edited that photo and the settings I used to take that photo. So we can couple this along with one of my previous videos about my 5 favorite Photoshop tools. So I'm going to be using some of those tools when editing this video. So in this video, like I said, I'm going to be going through this photo here that I took probably the end of January, but posted it like the first week of February. It's gotten a lot of attention. I actually uploaded it to a magazine VIP section that I belong to. So it's been a fairly popular photo. So these are the settings that I used for it when taking the photo and now editing the photos. So I already have the photo opened up in the Camera Raw utility within Photoshop. Because this is a photo that I would like to print in a larger format and share in larger formats, the first thing that I do want to do is I want to come down here and use that Enhance utility here, so that way I can get that super resolution here to, give me a larger file, larger resolution in order to print larger format. So we're going to click Enhance, and we're going to wait a minute here for this to happen. So now that the photo is open in the Camera Raw utility within Photoshop, and we've run the Enhance tool to make the larger file, we're going to go through some basic edits here within this utility. Anybody who uses Lightroom will notice that the Photoshop Camera Raw utility is actually very similar to Lightroom. A lot of the same settings exist within the Develop module of Lightroom. One of the things that I will do once in a while is I'll actually hit the Auto tab just to see what it does to the photo, see if I like those edits. This is straight out of the camera. There was no other edits done to this prior to that, so we're going to get rid of that for right now. But as you can see, using auto, it takes down the exposure a little bit, brings down your highlights, brings up the shadows, adjusts the white and black point, as well as the vibrance and saturation. We're going to make a few other edits to this as well, just to enhance this a little bit, to really bring out some of the color, bring out some of the structures within the photo between the trees and light rays and so on. So the first thing I want to do is actually I'm going to bring the exposure down just a little bit more, just to, make sure that, I have everything kind of properly exposed. As you can see here that as we're doing this, the histogram does change. So when we bring down the exposure, it actually, brings down our highlights as well and kind of stacks things up towards our midtones and shadows. So we are going to bring this down just a hair. The other thing that we want to do is we do want to bring up contrast a little bit and I'm going to rock these back and forth so you can kind of see. So bringing up the contrast, if we drive it all the way to the top, you can see that things really, really get crunchy and punchy in here. We're not going to quite go that far. The auto setting set it for like a +6. So we're going to set the contrast for about a +12, and that's really going to help define some of these lines and edges in here to help, bring about some of these, some of these rays. The next thing that we want to do is we want to adjust our highlights and shadows a little bit because even though we brought down the exposure, the highlights are going to have areas where, you look in here, this is kind of blown out in here, basically where the sun is going to be blown out. So we do want to drop the highlights a little bit more. I mean, it did bring it down a significant amount from the beginning because this is where it started, and then we're going to come right down to probably about here. Same thing with the shadows. The auto brought it up to a +51, but as you can see, the shadows were kind of light here and are kind of dark, so we're gonna bring them up a little bit but not too much. So auto set it up here, so we're actually going to come back down and just do a little bit of lightening of the shadows because that brings out some of our contours and textures down here in the ground. So the white and black point here are going to be pretty good where they're set. From here, one of the things that I really like about the Camera Raw tool within Photoshop is, you know, you can adjust your texture, clarity, and dehaze right from here. And what these do, these are 3 sliders that affect a lot of different things within your photo. You know, your texture, you know, will add some sharpening, and will take away some noise from your photo. Your clarity works on your midtones, and we'll rock some of these back and forth so you can see. And then your dehaze will take away some of that haze and kind of darken the edges of your image. So as you can see with the, I don't know if you can tell here with the texture slider, you know, if we come all the way to the top, you can see a lot of texture in here, but if we drop it all the way down to the bottom, it really kind of muddies this up a little bit. So we actually want to bring the texture up a little bit, just so that way we can bring out, you know, the feel of this, you know, little wooded area, the ground in this wooded area. If I remember correctly, it was kind of mossy and everything in here, so it's really good for some nice good texture. I don't usually mess with clarity too much because, you know, you end up with some over sharpening that happens with clarity. You know, it does take out some of, you know, some of your haze and blurriness within your photo, but I don't really want to do too much with that. Clarity is one of those things where, you know, people will use a lot of clarity because, I mean, look at the effect that this has. It takes out a lot of that blurriness in the ground and everything, but what ends up happening in some of your photos is, and you can kind of see it up here, is you get kind of a halo around some of your structures, because basically what happens is you end up over sharpening your photo, so you don't want that to happen. You know, a little bit of clarity is a good thing and it goes a long way, but, you know, we're not going to use too much of it. We're just going to go +10. The next one is dehaze. Dehaze is a tool that I like to use once in a while, because dehaze, you know, and I'll rock it back and forth here, because it does a few things. Like, we can really just completely, you know, blow out the image by dropping it down, but then darken things out by bringing it all the way to the top. So we're going to do, and actually when you do that, you can kind of see where the fog and the sky, you know, meet. You know, the fog was really burning off at this point, so it's, you know, you know, we get a little bit of contrast between the gray of the fog and then the blue sky. So we're gonna bring up the dehaze just a little bit, just so we can, you know, take a little bit of haze out, you know, while keeping some of our rays and lines and everything. Vibrance and saturation, we're not going to mess with too much. The auto actually put our vibrance at 15. We are going to take the saturation up just a hair as well, just so that way we can kind of accentuate some of that orange and warmth within the scene. So we've got our image open in Photoshop here, and you know, at this point, there are a few things that I like to do before I start doing any edits. I usually unlock the background, just so that way I can work with this layer, as well as, you know, other layers that I put with it, or change its order and stuff. When it's locked as the background, it doesn't always move around for you too easily, so I usually unlock that as well. So the first thing that I want to do, because I posted this as a square image, so the first thing that I like to do with these images is I like to crop first, just so that way I can get my positioning and composition the way I'd like it before going any further. And actually, if you look down here in the bottom, you can actually see that there's a part of a parking lot here. I shot this in a parking lot on my way to work. I want to be able to get rid of this parking lot, this pavement over here, and I want to get rid of a lot of this blue up here, just so that way we can focus in on our starburst here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the crop tool, set our ratio for a 1:1 square, just so that way we can now just crop it in the way we want it. I did post this photo as a square crop, and I did make it so that way the sun was just about in the middle here. I might have to just bring it in a little bit there. Yeah. So now that we've got it cropped for our composition, and this works out pretty well, because now we have our lines coming in from the edges, bringing us to the brightest part of the scene, which is going to be where your sun and starburst are. Next thing I want to do is, there's a lot of blue sky up here. It could be a little bit distracting, so we're actually going to use a hue and saturation layer on here, and then select a color range mask and bring that in screen here. So we're going to sample a color in here to make sure that we get what we need. so we can get a little bit of that blue. And as you can see, when I select the blue, where, you know, we have a lot of this here. I'm going to reset the fuzziness to actually just target the blue and only the blue. So you can see that basically anything that's up here that's bluer is targeted in this mask. So from here, once we've set our mask, now we can change colors of things. You can see things are getting kind of purple and everything else. So if we actually drop the hue all the way over to the left in the red area, that actually warms this up a little bit. You know, if we wanted to really get nuts with it, you know, drop the saturation all the way up. So we actually could add just a little bit of saturation, because at least this way it matches it with the scene a little bit. So that way, you know, we still have some blue in here, and that's okay, because it does exist within our scene, but we're at least eliminating most of it, so that way it can bring in those warm colors that we wanted. So this is our basic composition, and just a quick edit to our hue and saturation to keep things lined up. The next thing I want to do is, because the edges of this photo are kind of bright in a lot of places, so this is kind of bright up here between the trees, some bright spots over here, this is a little bright over here. We're going to add a vignette to this a little bit, and there's a lot of different ways that you can add a vignette to a lot of these, you know, a lot of your photos. This is a way that I started using a couple of years ago. It's pretty efficient, works pretty well. So I usually come down here to the shape tool. So we're going to keep the ellipse tool selected here, and basically all we're going to do is we're just going to draw a big circle around this here. So once we've gotten this drawn, and you'll notice that it's kind of blocking out the whole image, because now we've got a big black ellipse on this, or circle in this case. So once we've gotten that in place where we want it, because, you know, I want to darken out these areas here to create that vignette, we come up to our Pathfinder in the properties for this, and we select the second option here, which actually subtracts that shape from the scene instead of adding it. So once we've gotten this set, you know, we've got our areas covered that we want to have covered, we can come into our shape properties. The big feature that I use here is the feather tool, because when you feather this up real high, it feathers that shape, and then that will add that softness to the transition coming in. So from there, we'll actually also change the opacity of it, just because, you know, it's pretty obvious that we've darkened out these corners. So then we can just drop the opacity. Usually 35 to 40 is pretty good. We'll actually set this for 40, see how that looks. Now that looks pretty good, and we can turn this on and off to see the difference. And you can see that it's just enough to actually help keep our focus within the center of the photo here. So that's how I edited this photo. Thank you for coming along with me. And if you missed my video about the favorite Photoshop tools that I use, yeah, you can check that out right here. Really do appreciate if you guys would like and subscribe. Support the channel, share it with your friends. Anybody that has subscribed, I really do appreciate your support. And thank you for coming along on this journey with me. I really do appreciate that. I'm doing a lot of appreciating here. So like I said, thanks for coming along. We'll see you again next week.